Hey everyone, and welcome to Success on Understandable English. This series, we talk to people who have had success learning English, and we learn what they did to achieve it. This is part 2 with Katya, so let's get to it. So, do you have any ideas of what the hardest things to pronounce, words, phrases, or sounds in English?
Silent sounds can be a bit confusing, yeah, because you need to remember when you just then know the rules, you know that MN, yeah, and some of them should be silent, like prompt, yeah, or solemn, or Norling, yeah, something like that.
To especially teach my kids to listen to English, not to read English, is an important thing because many of them will look at the letters and say, you know, this should be like this, but of course, when you say the actual word, it's nothing like it should be because English is a bit tricky in that sense. Next up is the question about the accent. I like to ask foreigners that study English, do they prefer an American or a more British accent or Australian accent?
I would say that I stick to American English for some reason, for several reasons. Well, first of all, I think sorry, maybe I will offend someone, but I think it's easier to acquire as, again, we watch mostly American movies, we listen to American music, we listen to American podcasts, and so it's closer, yeah, to us, and we have access to this accent. And second of all, I think that British accent is more difficult because the melody is very, very, very different to like any other languages, like their peaks and falls there. Yeah, it's something very unusual, not as in American accent. And I think American accent has a tendency to be simplified a bit. For example, now there is a trend to pronounce almost all the O sounds like and you don't need to think, is it like O or there? You can just say and mostly like you will be understood. And this is a good thing. Less work.
Easier for foreigners to pick up on. And also grammar can be a little bit less demanding as well. You can mix up a few tenses and it still might work all right. And continue on the pronunciation path. How do you personally practice pronunciation? And do you think it's important to have perfect pronunciation?
I do not think that you should have perfect pronunciation, and I actually think that it's not possible to have perfect pronunciation because you do not live there, you do not acquire language as like natives did or do. So it's almost impossible. If you work very hard on that, like, I don't know, months, maybe even years, you can. But not a lot of people have this opportunity to spend so much time on just pronunciation. So, but on the other hand, I think it's important, and there are some reasons for that. The first one is like we think that pronunciation is not important because like I don't care how I sound. Like I don't want to sound American. I just want to be understood. And it's okay. But the funny thing about pronunciation is when you want to understand what people are saying, you also need to focus on pronunciation because there are so many transformation of sounds, so many assimilations, so many different kind of phonetic processes that will change the sound completely. And especially at the beginner levels, I would say that it's important to focus on that and well, at least draw my students' attention to these changes. For example, instead of saying, what do? You will never hear it. Well, maybe, yeah, but typically you will hear like, what do you do? Well, they can stress out because they will not understand what it means. So I would say that the practical reason this is the first reason. And the second reason is especially depending on what you do. If your job is related to a communication, international communication, and you want to sound professional, if you want people to trust you, to believe you. No, there are actually a lot of studies on that, and this is true that pronunciation affects a lot, influence a lot on how people perceive you. And there is a study that a person who has kind of bold, whatever, like Slavic, for example, pronunciation and speaks perfect English will be perceived as a weaker speaker than the person with, let's say, average English, but with good pronunciation.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that as well. And I think also even in your own native language, you can definitely see it as you see foreigners who talk to you or even people in your own country. If you hear an accent that's from somewhere that's further away, you may think that, oh, that's person's, this stereotype or that stereotype without even knowing them. The accent is, the first thing that hits you both in the ears and the eyes as well. It's important in that sense. How do you personally practice your pronunciation?
Thankfully, and fortunately, there are a lot of tutorials on YouTube. And there is a really great teacher. Her name is Rachel, and she has her academy, and she has her website, and she has like wonderful lessons on pronunciation, focusing on each and every sound of English and all other aspects of pronunciation. So I would suggest just going and checking this website if you want to focus on your pronunciation or work on your pronunciation. And also shadowing helps a lot. So when you're listening to a native speaker, you try to copy their accent, their way of pronouncing words and phrases, and pronouncing them almost at the same time that you hear them, and recording yourself, and then checking and comparing.
Well, as we said, that pronunciation is really key to listening and understanding as well. And so normally when you pronounce a word that's foreign, you can hear yourself that you're not pronouncing it right. And the more that you practice, you can slowly get closer and closer. So I like to tell my students every day in the shower when you're washing your hair, repeat the words and sounds that are hard. You can hear when it's not right. You know that it's not right, but keep trying, and slowly you'll start to figure out how to make that sound more and more right. But of course, you need to keep a guide, be able to hear those sounds from a native or from a recording in order to double check that you're going in the right direction. So, do you have any favorite idioms or phrases in English?
I think that I like the ones that have like body parts in them. Yeah, for example, break your leg. That sounds very cruel, but actually is something very nice to say. Jaw dropping, eye opening, side splitting. These are not idioms, but these are some kind of adjectives that have metaphorical meaning. And can't wrap my head around it. Keep an eye on someone. Won't lift a finger. Everything with body.
Yeah, one of my favorites is, instead of saying "Are you joking?" and say "Are you pulling my finger?" which I think is kind of fun. I think I've heard "pulling my leg" as well. Both all those wonderful. Do you have any least favorite ones that you don't like, that you can't stand?
The ones that I can't remember. Yeah.
I guess that
I
makes
really
sense.
hate them.
Yeah, the ones you can't keep in your head, can't wrap your head around. Those
exactly.
are the ones that are the hardest ones to remember. Well, that's all for today. I hope you learned something new and found some new inspiration and motivation. Do you have any questions for Katya? If so, write them in the comments below and we'll respond. If you learned something new, don't forget to like, subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Toodles!